Hi guys, it's me, Jody Hand, Mrs. Hand Painted, and in tonight's video I'll be bringing you yet another fun wedding card that you can paint. And just like me, you probably have a lot of weddings coming up in the summertime, and this is a perfect occasion to make something handmade and heartfelt, as we're probably mailing most of our gifts to the happy couples who've probably postponed their weddings even. So if you have a wedding to go to and need to make a handmade card, why don't you paint along with me and paint this fun little wedding cake that you can customize in whatever colors that you want.
I'm going to start out by just sketching the base of my cake here. I'm going to pop up my finished drawing here so that you can see because the pencil's kind of hard to see. I drew it really faintly, and I'm using a water-soluble graphite pencil from Faber-Castell, and I'm using the HB, which would be the hardest pencil, which will give me the faintest line. And I'm just doing kind of an oval shape for the top, which will mostly be covered up with the flowers. And I'm just making the straight sides and then a curved bottom and making each layer just a little bit bigger than the last. And then when you draw that bottom layer, I like to go from the top down with this personally, but if you want to do it the opposite direction, that's fine too. And this way I just don't have to erase extra lines from behind. So one of the tips that I recommend when you're drawing these layers of the cake is that you want to have the curves of the second layer coming from behind that top layer so that it looks like it is bigger all the way around, so that you get that illusion of the cake layers being stacked one on top of each other. And then the last little part I just sketched out was just like a platter for the cake to sit on. So I just have that curving around the sides, and I got my trusty little light pad here, and I printed off the phrase best wishes in one of my favorite fonts to use for brush lettering, which is called Brilliant, I think. Yeah, Brilliant. And I've just downloaded that from somewhere, I can't remember, probably DaFont or 1001 Free Fonts. And I'm just tracing that at the top of my card. And just again, I'm using those Strathmore watercolor cards that I've been using for a bunch of my card designs that have been in my videos lately, and using that water-soluble graphite pencil. And I just printed this off in Microsoft Word in my font that I wanted to use. So just use whatever fonts you've got on your computer, or if you want to freehand letter it and feel super confident in that, I do recommend just kind of penciling it out first just to make sure that you get the spacing and sizing correct and you don't end up with it squished or running out of space for your letters. And I'm going to be using a Princeton Neptune round size 4 brush for this. And I'm going to start out with doing the floral details for my cake so that I can go back around the flowers afterwards, just remembering that watercolor is transparent. So anything that you want to be in the foreground, you should do first and then fill in behind it because you will see what is behind it. I mean, if you don't feel confident in doing that and you want to mask off areas for that, you could do it the opposite way, but this is just the method that I like to do, the fewest steps. So I'm just doing some very small roses. And the color I've chosen to use is from my Daniel Smith watercolors, and that is the Bordeaux color. It's a really pretty red violet color. I'm pretty much just using the same colors that I used in my last card design for that congratulations card. I just had it still on my palette. So making some really small rose shapes, making my C-shaped strokes going around the center. And I'm going to do some in that Carbazole violet that had a little bit of ultramarine or Prussian blue, some blue mixed with it, just making it more blue violet. You can kind of just do whatever colors you want. I just did some pink and purple because they were already on my palette. And I'm just adding a couple roses to each layer and kind of alternating the sides of what side of the cake they're on. And then I'll do a whole bunch along the bottom just to kind of frame out the bottom of the cake there. And I'm just trying to balance out the pink and the purple just to give that little variation. You can kind of blend up some colors and do whatever colors that you want for this. Maybe you know what colors the wedding is going to be in. Maybe pick those colors. And since I'm doing this really, really loose and they're pretty small, I mean, you can be pretty free with your strokes here and you don't need to get super detailed. Just kind of leave that white space in there when you're doing your C strokes. And here I'm just kind of maybe just tuck one that's kind of a half of a rose because that's coming out from the edge of that cake here on the bottom platter. And I apologize if I guess next time I do one like this, I'll draw lines a little bit darker and then you'll be able to see it a little more clearly. But as I get some more items on here, you'll be able to see a little more clearly that I'm doing that along the bottom edge of each cake layer. I think with my bright lights so that you can actually see my painting, that it kind of washes out my very light pencil. And I think I'm going to add some more to the top of this cake so it's really full on the cake. I have a lot along the bottom and just a couple accenting, and then we will add some leaves in here afterwards. So you don't want to get this too full of roses and then not leave any space for your little leaf accents. So, or if you didn't want to do any leaves, you could do that way. Just it's your painting and do it however you want. I'm just kind of filling in on the top to make a big cluster of roses all together on the top of the cake there. I'm going to let all of those dry. And I'm going to be making kind of like a tan color cake to make it more, I guess, maybe bohemian. And first, I'm actually going to take some of this neutral tint and make kind of outline the bottom platter, make it look like it's like a shiny silver platter. So I'm not completely filling it in with that gray color. I'm using neutral tint, but if you wanted to mix up a gray with ultramarine and burnt sienna or a blue and orange, you can make your own gray. But I have a neutral tint and I just like that for some of the gray. So I'm just kind of making some curved strokes and doing the outline edge of that platter so it looks like it's like a big shiny silver platter. And then for the cake part, I'm going to be mixing some yellow ochre with a little bit of transparent brown oxide. And I'm just making myself a really kind of a tan, a yellowy tan color. I just want to make the cake kind of, I don't know, this is really trendy right now, this kind of rusticy looking cake, I guess, that has flowers on it. So I'm not completely covering or painting it in. I'm just kind of making some strokes and leaving some white space so that it looks like it was frosted with like big chunks of frosting with a spatula. So I'm just going to do my first layer here and just kind of go over and just kind of just outline the edge there so that it's more defined. And then I'll just do some strokes across, back and forth, and curve them so that you have that cake making it look round. So I'm just curving it downward, make the cake look round, and just following the curve of my drawing and just kind of outlining the edges of it just to make those more defined. So now you can really see where my drawing was now that I'm going over that. I'm not completely covering it. I'm leaving some white space just to do some curved strokes to fill in. And I'll go back over after that's dry and just add another layer just to add a little more shadowing. So just kind of follow your outline here. And then, like I said, we'll go back over this after it's dried a little bit and we can add another layer just to add a little more shadowing, little shade area. And I did this really diluted. It's not very dark at all. And I am going to go back over all of my roses one more time as well after I finish doing this cake part. So for my next layer, I just added a little bit more of the transparent brown dioxide. And I'm just adding some shading along the edges just to define that. And then I'm going to kind of fill in the top part of the cake layers, uh, the, the part that would be on the top, just to make that look darker. And you can really tell that there's layers to that cake. Just kind of outlining the edges of my cake just to really define that. And then just along the bottom there a little bit. Now you can really give some dimension to that, make it look really three-dimensional. All right, I'm pretty much done with that cake part now, and I'm just going to add a couple more little flowers. Now that I have that plate in there, I just felt like it needed a little more fullness along the bottom. So I just added a couple more purple flowers, and I will go back over these one more time. I'm just going to add my leaves in, and I'm using the green gold. So it's more of like a yellow green, just a lighter color. I'm just going to add some very tiny little leaves coming out, just the smallest little strokes, just not even making a full leaf, but just tiny little almost dabs, just to give this some little leaves poking out. And just use those to fill in any little bare spots you might have along the top. I'm just kind of, sometimes I made two where the flowers are joined together, and you can have some that just kind of split off each side of the flowers. Here, that'll really fill in some of that blank area. And then you can make them a little bit bigger as you get down to the bottom. Okay, and I am going to go ahead and just do my lettering, and I'm switching brushes here. I'm just using, this is a Princeton Velvetouch round size 1 brush, and I'm using that violet, that Carbazole violet color, and I'm just going to go over the pencil lines that I drew out my lettering in and go over that with that purple color. And if you would prefer to do your lettering or your phrases in markers, a lot of people like, I've used many times before the like Tombow brush markers. I have a bunch of those, but I just like to match sometimes to the paints that I've got, and just using my watercolor brushes and watercolor to do my lettering. If I get really good one day, maybe I'll be able to do this freehand, but uh, for right now, I really like doing my tracing and pencil method and going over it. This way I make sure that it always fits in the space that I have for it, and I can make sure that my letters are even sizing. That's something that I am just not good at even in just my regular handwriting. And I just chose best wishes. I thought that was a nice little phrase. Congratulations, I tried out on here, but um, to get it tall enough, it was too long for my 5-inch card front. And I didn't want to make it any smaller font because I find that when I'm doing this style of font and when I'm doing the lettering, it's a little harder to do when it's too small, and I start losing the centers of some of my letters, and I just don't care for that. So I try to do it as big as I possibly can in the space that it will fit. And that's what's nice about doing the computer font like that and tracing it, is then you can make sure by, looking at the rulers on your computer screen, and you can measure how much space you have for that and print it off to make sure that it will fit. All right, so after I did the lettering, I thought that my purple was just too pale, and I decided to go back over all of my flowers with just one more coat. So I actually, I switched back over to my round 4 to go over the flowers with one more layer just to get those a little bit darker and just make them pop a little bit more. I just thought that it was just a little bit too pale. So I'm just going over and just leaving white space and letting some of that lighter purple show through. And we'll go back over the pink ones as well after I've just done one little layer over all the purple flowers. I just felt that it needed a little more oomph. But if you wanted to stick with that first layer and you like how it looked, go ahead. This is just me being a perfectionist and my personal taste of wanting it to be a little bit darker. Now, one suggestion I have, if you're not wanting a wedding card, you could also turn this into a birthday cake by maybe only doing 2 layers, or uh, you could just make a floral cake that has a couple layers. You could add candles instead of flowers on the top. You could really do a lot of different possibilities with cake cards. You could also turn it into a baby shower cake, maybe do a 2-layer cake, and you could paint pink or blue flowers on it, something like that. That's another suggestion to kind of make this a multi-use card design. It can't be just for weddings. You could do it as an anniversary gift, and you could put maybe for if it was 10 or 25 or 40, 50, you could just put the numbers on the top of the cake with the flowers. That would be really nice too for an anniversary card. So you could add this design to your all occasion cards box. If you make cards up ahead of time to have on hand, that'd be a good idea. Just make it really versatile and you can make this design several times. All right, thank you guys for watching so much. Please make sure you subscribe to my channel. I do try to post at least one video per week. Sometimes I get really ambitious and I get a couple in, but really just depends on my kids and how well they let me paint and film. So have a great day, guys, and thanks for watching.